Thomas Boulevard about 10, 12 years ago. And they took the photographs out there.
Great picture. Yeah, anybody, I guess anybody can go in there and access it.
Yeah, they talk to Miriam and she'll get the photographs for you.
Okay. Anyhow, my subject is not a dead one as we've, as so far we've been listening to. Although it's from the years past, it's.
Oh, are you
I'm gonna
telling
make
us?
it, I'm gonna make it a
Were you gonna
live
attend
thing,
this?
like
Yes.
Telling you
Oh,
about
I didn't know.
what's going on.
Back down and tell me.
No, I'll go sit down
I've
there.
made a number of
Pardon?
speeches,
I'll go
not
sit
a
over
lot,
there.
I'm not a politician,
Okay, you,
and I'm not
Yeah,
a
please.
lecturer, not a teacher, but over the years, because of my position and what I've done in life, I have from time to time made some speeches at my synagogue and business organizations, but this is the first time that I was ever introduced by anybody, and so it's a thrill. Thank you for introducing me. And whoever wrote up the publicity, I don't know, who wrote up the publicity for the Squirrel Hill magazine? I don't know her name. Anyhow, in the publicity that was in the Squirrel Hill magazine and maybe a few other places, I think it was in the Chronicle, it mentioned that I lived in Squirrel Hill in my formative years. Now, I have no idea what she was talking about. And I didn't know that those were my formative years when I was 12 at the time. Actually, I'm still going through my formative years. I haven't figured it out yet. Before I begin, I'm just curious, how many of you live now in Squirrel Hill? Most everybody. How many of you, I shouldn't ask this, women don't have to answer. How many of you were in Squirrel Hill in 1937?
you win that one, Sandy.
Okay, you're gonna get there with me. 1937 was 72 years ago. 72 years ago. It's amazing when I think back. And if somebody had written an article like I have done and what I'm going to give to you, had written that in the year that I was born, which was 1925, if there was a reason to write an article like that, but if they had, it would be about a community or an area in 1853. When I look at it from that frame, it's hard to believe that 72 years, in my case anyhow, have passed since I lived in Squirrel Hill. Just a little background, and you probably know this already because the Squirrel Hill book and maybe other lectures, but Squirrel Hill really began in the early, well, around the early 1900s. There was an electric car line that was made, was put together and went from Forbes downtown all the way on through Oakland and then up through Squirrel Hill. I think it went as far as maybe Shady Avenue, perhaps. It's about as far as it went. Then it was extended later on. But until that car line, the streetcar line, was put together, there wasn't too many people living around here. At that time, at the same time, in the early 1900s, they also extended Murray Avenue, a streetcar line down Murray Avenue, all the way down the hill, over to Homestead. And then things started to build up after that. Before that, this area was just a lot of farms, sheep farms, animal farms, one kind or another. Big homes. These were people who lived, who worked maybe downtown or the small towns nearby. Business people. Squirrel Hill to them at the time was living out in the country. So you'll find a lot of big homes, and it really didn't get started until right after World War I, when the Boulevard of the Allies was built. And at that time, when it was originally built, it only went as far as Shelley Park. And then they extended it through, am I wrong? No, okay, I saw you shaking your head. By the way, if I make a mistake or I say something that you know otherwise, let me know. As I get this out of books, and I've noticed that a number of sources that I've looked at are conflicted. They themselves are not sure. So if you think I'm wrong on anything, don't hesitate to let me know. Anyhow, the Boulevard Alleys was extended eventually into Squirrel Hill. And what happened was that a lot of the business people who worked in downtown, North Side, wherever, were able to, cars were starting to become popular in that time frame in the 1920s. And they could drive out from downtown after work and get to some place in Squirrel Hill. And so that's how it got built up. Because just like today, when they build tunnels or interstate highways, the areas that they reach and serve start to get built up. And that's how Squirrel Hill got built up. So now we've passed that early period, and we're talking now about 1937. And I said memory lane, but if you weren't around at that time, it's not memory lane for any of you. But hopefully you'll find it interesting. Memory lane is actually Forbes and Murray and Forward Avenue, the three main streets in Squirrel Hill. And I know I was curious when I first started this years ago, where the names came from. Murray Avenue was, there's an article that this was in the Squirrel Hill News 1994. It was my article that was written, that was published. But anyhow, there's a clue about Murray Avenue, how it got its name. It wasn't Murray Goldfarb. Murray Goldfarb had nothing to do with it. I don't know if there was a Murray Goldfarb, but if he had nothing to do with it, there was one. The name Murray came from Pittsburgh's fourth mayor. His name was Magnus M. Murray. Forbes was named for General John Forbes, who seized Fort Duquesne from the French. And Forward Avenue was the name of a well-known judge in Pittsburgh's early colonial days. All right, let's get back to Murray Avenue. That's where we're going to start because that's where I live. On Hobart, right behind the stores on Murray Avenue, the two apartment buildings are still there. 2 3-story apartment buildings right behind the storerooms on Hobart, right behind Murray Avenue. Now I called them high-rise apartments. The first high-rise apartments in Squirrel Hill. You had to walk up 50-some steps to get to the front door. There's nothing more high-rise than that. So that's where I live. In fact, if I looked out the front window, just like Sarah Palin, I could see Murray Avenue. Sarah and I have something in common. Now, Murray Avenue was actually my front yard, just steps away. And not only that, Murray Avenue was my whole world at that time. For a 12-year-old kid, I never got too far away from that area. So Murray Avenue was my front yard. And when I would walk down Murray, I would be walking towards Colfax, or H.B. Davis was in business at that time. And one or 2 years I went to Davis and then Colfax, but that was down the hill. The other way, the other direction, up Murray, the only time I got up there was when I went to the Manor Theater. That was past Beacon Street. You all know where the Manor is because that's still there. That's when I used to go to the movies with my friends. I think that early on, my mother would have to take me there. But when I got to be 12 years old, of course, I went with my friends on Saturday morning to see the cowboy movies and the cartoons and the coming attractions. And the cereals were very popular at that time. And also, before we would go into the theater to see the movie, we would go around the corner to Young's newsstand. Y-O-U-N-G-K-S, Young's newsstand. I think, I don't know what they call it today, is it Squirrel Hill newsstand? I'm not sure, I think so. But anyhow, we went there. The candy was a little cheaper than the machines at the Manor Theater. They were penny candies. We weren't going to pay a nickel for Holloway milk duds. We went into Young's and we got penny candy there. They had red licorice dollars, and they had rock candy. It looked like stones or rocks. It was all sugar. That was a popular candy item, rock candy, like stones. We did once in a while get the Holloway milk duds in the Manor Theater lobby. That's if we had an extra nickel in our pocket. We could do that. Otherwise, we were out of luck. Incidentally, the price of the movies in those days for kids was 10 cents. And then at one point in time, the city council tacked on a 1 penny amusement tax. That upset our whole budget. But we still went anyhow. Young's was about as far as I got when I would take a walk. That was sort of the outpost of my world. I had absolutely no idea what lay beyond that. That's as far as I got. There was nothing that I would know of that was beyond that I'd have any interest in. So that's as far as I got. Besides, Forbes to me was the southern border of that mystic north of Forbes. That to a south of Forbes or like me, it was like an enchanted forest, never to enter it. If you cross the street and were north of Forbes, you don't know what might have happened. You could have been abducted or something. Well, let's get back to Murray Avenue. I remember a lot about Murray Avenue. It was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. My brain was formative, as somebody said. And so I remember a lot about it. And but I still had to, when I did this, I still had to go downtown to the Heinz Library and peruse the Polk City directory to get the names of all the stores that were there. I wouldn't remember them. I remembered some that were closer to where I lived, but most of them I hadn't remembered. When it became apparent that Murray Avenue, because it wasn't originally a commercial street, but when it became apparent that it was going to be a commercial street, to lose its residential characters, storerooms were squeezed. The storerooms that are on Murray Avenue, from about Beacon, or actually Hobart down to Douglas, were probably the front yards of regular houses, residential houses that were on those streets. And when they realized it's not going to become a residential street, somehow or another they squeezed these storerooms. Now, I don't know, I wrote this thing in 1996, something like that. I'm not sure I've been by there lately to notice, but if you stand on Murray and look up to the west, where the pizza places are, right behind there's looks like they're houses. Whether their houses were lifted up in the air to put the storerooms underneath, I don't know. Or whether those are the second or third floor of those houses, I'm not sure. And at the time I wrote this, I remember there were stairways in between the storerooms that went up to these houses. And I'm not sure whether those stairways are still there. In 1937, some of the blocks on Murray Avenue were like the present-day strip district. The majority of stores were involved in some way with food. So much so that there were 26 stores, 26. From Beacon to Phillips, that's only 2 blocks. But there were 26 stores on both sides that were devoted to food. Grocers, butchers, bakers, fruit stores, fish and poultry markets, all side by side. And each had their own clientele. I remember my mother, she shopped there, we lived right there, she shopped in those 2 blocks. And she was extremely loyal to wherever she shopped. She wouldn't go anywhere else. And there was blocks, there was a grocery store, Max Horowitz, the name of a butcher. The expression was she went by blocks, or she went by Horowitz. They didn't say they went to there, they went by there. That's where they shopped. And none of the stores, of course, were fancy like today's supermarkets. There were some big stores, but they were closer to Forbes. There was Kroger's, there was an A&P, but we didn't shop there. That was too close to being north of Forbes. My mother shopped down below. And there was no pretense on these stores at that time of being particularly clean like today. There was sawdust on the floors, and fly strips always were hanging from the ceiling. The big pretense that there was some vermin around, and they didn't, I don't know, I guess they didn't try to catch them. They had these, yeah, right.
Stores here.
They had inside, they had these, they were gummed strips of some sort, and the flies would go on there and get stuck, and that was it for the flies. But there was, oh yes, and there was sawdust. They all had sawdust on the floor. There was, however, on Forbes, a market called the Sanitary Meat Market. But as I said in the article, after all, that was Forbes. That wasn't really. Evidently, it was too clean because by 1938, it was gone. My favorite store on Murray Avenue as a kid was Bankman's. It's a fish store. And you know what happened there? They went to the strip district and became a big, big company. But at that time, they just had a little storeroom on Murray Avenue. And in the front, as you walked in, there was a big fish tank. It was like going to the aquarium. I used to walk by and I would stand there for a half hour watching the fish swim in the tank. And they weren't very pretty. That's why I never liked fish. They were black and ugly, and it just didn't seem like that was something that I would like to eat. Okay, now on the west side of Murray, the west side would be the side opposite of, which way? That way, right. On the west side, there were 8 food purveyors in a row. Here's a few of them. There was Oilers, as I mentioned, Steinberg Meats, Schillett's Fruit Store, Adler's Deli, became a Korean place, I think, at one time, years later, Plotkin Poultry. Across the street, there was Whitman's Fruits, Cohen's Kosher Meat Market, Seawald's Poultry, and Glick's Food Market. So as I had written, there was lots of food stores. Going back up Murray toward Beacon, it was a little more varied. There was some food outlets, such as blocks, which I mentioned, On the west side also, there were two restaurants on Olive, Murray Avenue. I guess their mothers were great cooks, and they were, and most everybody stayed home. The population, there'd be no room in the two restaurants, although Abrams and Friedman, it was Abrams and Friedman, which was like a deli. And the Canton Tea Garden, which is on the, now I've written this 10, 15 years ago, so there have been some changes, which I didn't refer to. But the Tea Garden was on the spot where the Peking Kitchen Chinese restaurant, is that still there? Anybody know? Not there anymore either. Yeah. It was the only Chinese restaurant. And Abrams and Friedman was a nice little deli that even had white tablecloths. And in picking up information, there was an ad in what was called the Squirrel Hill News. Squirrel Hill News. Great little newspaper, neighborhood newspaper. They put an ad in because at this point in time, 37, 38, they put in air conditioning. Nobody had air conditioning. And they put in air conditioning. Well, the first Sunday that they were open, after the air conditioning was put in, mobs of people came. Nobody knew what air conditioning was like. You didn't have it at home. They heard about it, they knew what it was, but they never were involved with it. So the place was mobbed, they couldn't feed everybody. So they put an ad in the Squirrel News. We apologized. We're going to be open next Sunday again, and we're going to have specials. We're cutting the price on some of the things, so you can take advantage of it. And they were like $3.95 for a complete steak dinner. Those were the kind of numbers in those days. And 2 doors from Hobart. One of the pictures this gentleman showed me is that block. 2 doors from Hobart, there was a new Isley's Dairy Store. That's the second storeroom. I guess Pinsker's is there now, I think. It wasn't the corner store, it was next to it, Isley's. Opened up a dairy store. And I know a lot of you remember Isley's because of the skyscraper cones enjoyed by many generations of Pittsburghers. Now, I always remember when they opened up that particular day in the early 30s, because on opening day, they gave away 2 cones for the price of 1. And a nickel, I think the cones were a nickel, not more than that. So for a nickel, you got 2 skyscraper cones. And there was a line from inside the store down Murray to the corner of Hobart, and all the way up Hobart to where the apartments that I lived in were in. Quite a mob of people, at least 100 feet. And that was that way most of the day. That line was there. It was a hot summer day or a spring day. And I'm not sure how many times I got in line. I know it was more than once. They had no way of checking on that. Also in that area, in that block, there was Ritz Tailoring and Hollywood Beauty Shop. Hollywood Beauty and Barbershop, which in 1937, and quite a few of them in those days, had a circulating library at the beauty shops, because women would go in there and have their hair done and have that, whatever you call that oven that's over their head. And they had books there for them to read, and then I think they got actually to loaning them out as well. The type of business that in number was second to food outlets. I said there were 26 food outlets. The number of shops or types of shops that were second to that was beauty and barber shops. On the 3 streets that we're talking about, there were 22 establishments that were involved with hair cutting and styling. The 3rd most popular business was cleaning and tailoring. There was 18 of these. I say that we must have had a fetish about looking good and keeping clean. It's hard for me to realize why that was the case. You know, this was Depression years. And you would think people wouldn't be spending money on those kind of things, but they did. Barbershops, beauty shops, cleaning and tailoring.
Was it sooty the air was?
With what?
With how sooty the air was from the mills?
Well, that could be, yeah, there's no question about that. It was pretty dirty in Pittsburgh in that period. Yeah, that might have had something to do with it. As far as the cleaning shops and tailoring, yeah, you're probably right. Before we leave that part of Murray Avenue, we have to note that there was other stores. There was Chernu's Brown Bill Shoe Store. I know the fellow that ran it. I'm trying to remember his name. You know his name. What was it?
Me?
Chernu. I said it's right here. Chernu. Anyhow, there was a shoe store, and he had a new invention. He didn't make it, but shoe stores had it to make sure you had the right fit. You put your feet in like an X-ray machine, and we didn't think anything of it, that it would be dangerous, and we all did it. And as a 12-year-old, I couldn't wait to find out what the size of my shoe. Well, it wasn't a shoe. They were high boots. What did they call them? There was a name. They went up to calf length, and lots of strings. And no, there was always in the side of the shoe. There was always a knife, a little knife. And that was the cat's meow. There was Rosenblum's Bakery, which was still there at the time I wrote this. One of the handful of businesses that remain today in the same location. Well, that was then. Now, I think Little Shoe Store is the only one that's still around. And another store, and that's in one of the pictures, because I remember it was Bond's Hardware. That was a popular store. And I used to call him in my mind anyhow, the kindly old Mr. Bond. He was probably about 40 years old. To me, he was kindly old Mr. Bond. On the east side of Murray, in the Beacon to Hobart block, there was Greenberg the tailor, Kubitz and Goss Fruits, and I love that name, Kubitz and Goss. It just rolled right off of your tongue, Kubitz and Goss. They should have made a song about it. And there was the Squirrel Hill Nut Shop. All they had was nuts. And they did a big job for years. And then on the corner, Callahan's Drugstore. Now, a drugstore on the corner was a prerequisite in those days. Why all drugstores were on corners, I'm not sure. Evidently, they were like anchor stores today. If you had a drugstore on the corner, it seemed to draw other people to the neighborhood as well. Another thing was that maybe the drugstores were the only ones that could afford the higher rents. The corner store, I'm sure, collected a higher rent than the stores that were in the middle of the block. And drugstores, being high volume kind of stores, maybe they could afford the rents better. And there were 9 drugstores, 9 individual drugstores from Forbes Shady all the way down to Forward Avenue. Forbes Shady became eventually Meyer Roses, and that's gone. There was Sun Drug at Forbes and Murray, next to, I think it was next to the Manor. The May Drug was next to the Manor. The May Drug was next to the Manor. These are off chains. There was a Stein's Pharmacy in the Barton block. Earlier it was called Sandemar's. Sandemar's originally had a drugstore on Forbes, and they moved to Murray and became Stein's. And on Beacon, there was the Beacon Pharmacy. If you grew up in Squirrel Hill and was a teenager at the time, we all gathered together at the Beacon Pharmacy after school. Not all of us, but that was the crowd. It's a place where the kids hung out, at the Beacon Pharmacy after school let out at 3:05. And in my article then, I wrote that the Beacon Pharmacy was the only survivor until recently, so that was there for quite a while. Then there was this Callahan's that I mentioned before, down at the corner across from Douglas, where I think the pizza place is now. There was Abe Littman. Abe Littman Drugs. And then the Phillips Pharmacy, which is the corner of Phillips, was owned by Saul Adler. And down the hill, at the very bottom of the hill, the Barfield Pharmacy. A gentleman by the name of Chabin owned that. Another fond memory for me in this area of Murray is Cicero's Barber and Beauty Shop. This indented, if you'll notice, that block is indented somewhat. Looks today much like it did in 1937. But Cicero's brings back some memories, more memories to me than most stores, because as a 12-year-old boy, I visited there at least every 2 weeks. It was a little extravagant. Haircuts were 25 cents, but my mother paid for it. And I went every 2 weeks. But I can't help remembering the kibitzing barbers. Now, any of you are old enough to remember going to Cicero's at all? No? Well, besides being a barber shop, they made you, the barbers were interesting characters. They made you feel like grown-up kids. And one thing that I regret, that I couldn't remember the names of the barbers. Somebody wrote to me later on that did remember it. One of the guys was Marco. He looked like Paul Whiteman. You know Paul Whiteman, the orchestra leader?
Mhm.
He looked just like Paul Whiteman. And I remember the clippers that they used. What I did like was itching hair. The hair that would fall down on my back. I hated that, but what I did like about the barbershop at that time, you know, too many happen today. A barbershop to a 12-year-old kid was like a rite of passage, an initiation into a man's world. And who at that age, 12 years old, could keep their eyes away from the ever buxom manicures? 12 years old. Okay, we're going back up to Forbes. Forbes in the 20s and 30s was not the fashionable esplanade that it is today. Now, when I wrote this, it was. It isn't anymore today. But at that time, it was pretty fancy. In fact, in 1929, before I wrote this, of course, there was only 2 stores that could be classified as retailing women's wear. There was a Renee Salon, which was a beauty and a dress shop combined, located near where the library is today, and Abraham Goldstein's Furs, which were a few storerooms up the street. By 1937, when we're taking our walk, the flavor on Forbes was beginning to change. There was a Renee down on Murray. The Renee Salon moved to Murray, and Goldstein's, the fur place, was no longer around. The effects of the Depression of the early 30s was beginning to diminish in 1937, and people were beginning to feel more affluent. The whole neighborhood of Squirrel Hill was changing at that point, as the migration of the Jewish people from the Hill District was almost complete. Just as an example, in the directory, I counted them. It took me quite a while to count them. The number of Cohens, people with the family name of Cohen, was, well, in the Hill, I have it here somewhere. I'll find it when I get home. Anyhow, in the Hill District, there was about, I don't know, 300 colored families. Squirrel Hill at that time was maybe, this is the early 30s, maybe it was 25. And then when that migration started, it completely reversed. Because by the late 30s, there was probably 300 people by under the name of, I had the last name of Cohen. So that shows you how it changed. And there were a lot of women's fashion businesses at that time. They were now in place then. Dell's was there then. It hasn't been too long ago that they closed up. There was a Mrs. Sarah Linton milliner. That's hats, isn't it? Milliner's hats. It was a hat store. Grace Miles was 5867 Forbes. Little's, of course, was there, which is at its present location, but it wasn't as big as it is today. And other fashion stores catering to women, but now long gone, are the Marlin Dress Shop, the Yorkshire Shop, the Paulette Hat Shop, and 3 fur salons. 3, Max Barfield, Liners, and Saul Shipton. The balance of the stores were mostly service-type stores, such as beauty and barber shops, cleaning and tailoring, and a Chinese laundry. E-Nim. E-Nim. One store that appeared as far back as 1929, and I had written then, it's still there, but it isn't today, was Forbes Hardware. The other survival from 1929 is the Pittsburgh National Bank. I guess it's called some PNC.
Peoples.
Yeah, it was called People's Pittsburgh Trust originally. Now, an interesting historical fact. When I did this, there was a Montefiore Hospital health place there. Right near the Squirrel Hill Cafe, right near the corner of Forbes and Maroon. I don't know what's there today. It'd be about next to the Squirrel Hill.
Uncle Sam's.
What's that?
Uncle Sam's?
I think they were there, yeah, they were there for a while.
Is that the building that First Federal, or
No,
No, it might be
no, what
next
place
door.
moved to right first?
Well,
Franklin Federal?
yeah, it might be,
And then nice offices and,
yeah.
some
Well, at the time I wrote this, it was an Isley's, another Isley's was there. But in the 1920s, that storeroom was Squirrel Hill's first Nickelodeon. It's a movie, it's what the movie theaters were called early on, Nickelodeons, only because the nickel didn't get in. It was called the Orpheum. And you can see, if you were walking along that street at that time, I didn't know this until I happened to look up. And above Isley's, which was Isley's then, you could see imprinted in like cement, Orpheum. And over the years it wore down. I'm not sure if you can still see it or they covered over it. But that was the first movie theater. That was before the Manor. The State Liquor Store was on Forbes. It was where the Squirrel Hill Photo Shop was, if you remember that. That's gone. There also, I was kind of surprised, there was 2 automobile dealers on Forbes. Constantine's Motors, which is at the corner of Forbes and Shady, where the Starbucks is now. And Sampson's, which was on Forbes at that time also. Sampson shared a location with Abbey's Pocket Billiards. Also in the automobile business was Cayman Chevrolet. They were on Forbes as well. They had a used car lot on 5880 Forbes. Evidently a large vacant lot then. I'm not sure what it is today, but it was on Forbes near Shady for quite a while.
That's where the new Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts, or that's across, yeah.
No,
maybe
next
it
door.
was. I'm not sure if it was that side of the street or not.
Yeah.
Speaking of Dunkin'
Yeah,
Donuts,
Atlanta.
speaking of that location, and now this wasn't there in 1937, but maybe some of you remember the Forum Theater. I thought it was a good theater. It was new and clean, had great movies and on. But that wasn't there in 37. Before we move away from Forbes, I just want to mention the Squirrel Hill Cafe. I wasn't allowed to drink then, so I never went in there. But it was there in 1937. And I'm not sure how long before that it was there. In 1929, it was the Squirrel Hill Fruit Market. Let's see, is there a connection between fruit and alcohol? And in 1938, it was the only establishment on Forbes that could be classified as a restaurant, with the exception of perhaps Ice's. Now, you know what it's like today, that block of Forbes. It's practically all restaurants. As compared to then, they were the only ones that sold food. All right, just for a moment, get back down Murray. The first few blocks before you got to Beacon on Murray didn't quite have the Borscht-built atmosphere of Lower Murray. The food stores were the large chains. There were some large chain food stores. As I said before, we didn't shop up there, or my mother did. They were the large chain types, not the small family-owned ethnic outlets that you had further down. Another large chain in that same block was Kresge's 5 and 10. And that was when items were really 5 cents and 10 cents. If you would have had a dollar store there, then nobody would have gone there. When you could go to Kresge's for 5 and 10 cents. And that same block where the manor is, there was Ortoliva's Shoe Fixery. Shoe Fixery. That was evidently a marketing name, and it worked because they were there quite a while. There was also Price's Dress Shop and Rhea, R-H-E-A, Bakery. On the opposite corner, the main corner of Forbes and Murray, was the golf service station, which was there for, it just seemed like forever. And next door to the golf station, at that time, was Little Caesar's Pizza Place, and Wedner's Squirrel Hill Flower Shop, which I think is still there. But in that same block of stores, there was a McKinley Gregg Auto Company, another automobile dealer in that same stretch of stores. I couldn't quite figure out how an automobile company could have survived in that kind of an area. I noticed that if you stood where the golf station was and looked towards that building, you could see that the building, the type of construction that building was, at one time could have housed an automobile agency. Next door to that was Benjamin Little's Shoes, which I think, I'm not sure if it's the same Little that was on Forbes, probably the same family. And the Peter Pan Cleaners. And then, which was in one of the pictures this gentleman showed us, I wasn't sure if it was still there, now I know it was not. Kahn's Restaurant. There was another restaurant besides Abrams and Friedman. Kahn's Restaurant, good restaurant. I think it was mostly Hungarian type of food, it was very good. And then when I wrote this, I said that still was there today, the building was, but it's not now. Past Darlington, where the post office now stands, was a large empty lot. This holds many memories for me because it was the site for many years of the Beth Sholem Synagogue lawn fair. Now, I don't know how long it's been since that's not been there, but that was there every year. It was the lawn fair. The lawn fair was a fun carnival type of fair with individual booths designed for games and gambling to raise funds for the synagogue. To a 12-year-old city boy, it was an exciting few days of light, sounds, and smells that are associated with county fairs. And they used that empty lot, was there for at least a weekend. It was a lot of fun, Past the empty lot was the OK Grocery, the forerunners of today's Giant Eagle. There was Markley's Beauty Shop and Schulberg's Restaurant. Okay, there's another restaurant that I forgot about. Schulberg's, it was a really very good restaurant. Then there was a gasoline station at the corner of Bartlett. On the opposite side of Murray, there was the Bourne Building, which is still there. I don't know when it was built, but it's still there. Obviously, the people that worked there, the doctors and so forth, are no longer there. And I don't think you would know any of these names either, though. Past Bartlett, where Giant Eagle is today, Pearl Rich Bob's, another big chain type of stores. There was Philip Mazzacco the barber, the modern beauty salon, Meyer Kaufman's Fruits, Maury's Boot Shop, Maury Schaefer. He was a real character, Maury's Boot Shop. Leonard Vinstock Jewelers and the Lord Baltimore Cleaners. On the west side, the U.S. Post Office was in the building that now houses, I think it's Kosher Mart. There was, that same building was also home to the Murray Beacon bowling alleys, which were they were on both floors at one time, the first floor and downstairs. And I think they,
One floor had duck pens and one floor had.
yeah, oh, that's right, that's right. I finally found somebody that was in my category.
Close, not quite.
Close enough. Also in that building, there was George's lunchroom, a little lunchroom in that same building. Then there was Klein's Rapid Shoe Repair, the Mala Beauty Salon. And then in 37 or 38, the Beacon Theater was built. I think they called it one time the Guild.
That was after. It became the guild after the.
Yeah,
Beacon.
after. Then it became a deli, stage deli.
Right.
Yeah, it was there a very short time. It was a great deli, I don't know why it didn't last long. The area past the theater, the Beacon Theater, was vacant. And this eventually was where the oft-lamented Weinstein's restaurant was located. By now, I believe we've covered all of Murray and Forbes, so let's head downhill to Forward. Because to me, 1937, Forward was even more of a distant land than Forbes, quite far away. However, about that year, my family moved to Pinnock Street, which is across from Alderdice High School. So Forward now was very close to where I was living, and I used to walk down there quite often to go to the movie theater. I was a film buff even then. And the other place I went to quite often, the Hot Puppy Shop. Hot Puppy Shop, a fellow by the name of Mr. Rosenberg. Kindly, is another kindly old man, who was probably 40 years old. But he loved the kids, and I used to beg, borrow, and not steal, but beg, borrow a nickel from my father to go around the corner and have a hot dog from Mr. Rosenberg, the Hot Puppy Shop. And it's just, I think there's not sure who's there now, there is a Taylor. And anyhow, it's just like a pie corner. It's real tiny. You walk in, you're right.
There's a coffee shop in there.
Oh, is there?
What is it called?
It's right at the
Yeah.
corner of
Right by the alley.
yeah,
Yeah, behind Polo.
hot dog.
Well, it used to be.
And the shop, as I said, was a little sliver of a place, but it could have been the Ritz to a boy of 12 years old. Other places in that block, that you might, well, I don't think you remember, I don't remember, Saw Lang Deli, Morris Sirocco Grocery, Lewis Hinks Tailoring, Rose Salt Sobriety, and of course, there was the large, some of you may remember, the Sampson Automobile Showroom, which is across the street from there. No, it's just, it's what is there, Korean or
There's a Korean
a
wholesale
food store?
grocery.
If my memory serves me right, in the early 1930s, a large miniature golf course was situated where Lord Duncan's is today. Miniature golf course. And there was another one right around the corner, just past where the Sheratora Synagogue is. There was a large empty space that's now some kind of a medical office building. That was, at that time, it was a pretty large empty space, and somebody built a miniature golf course there. So there was two of them in almost the same vicinity. But that was all the rage then, because it was easy, it was cheap, and we didn't have much recreation going on because it was Depression years. And I don't think, as I recall, neither one of them were there that long. We can't leave Foreman without mentioning in the 90s, Watkins Real Estate. We had last year, 2 years ago, a gentleman from Watkins, of the Watkins family, that talked about the holdings that Watkins had in Squirrel Hill. Particularly, they were the ones responsible for building the Marfield apartment. And I think we've had some talks about the Marfield apartment as well. And not only the Marfield apartment, but they built all the apartments behind it, on Alderson, Mayburn Road. So Watkins was responsible for many of the residences in Squirrel today. Well, that about completes our walk. I hope you have accompanied me all the way, and I believe all of you have, and brought back some memories to some of you.
I was there only a couple of years after you.
Okay. Well, but you would, if you were in Squirrel, you'd remember some of these places. And if not, it's a good history lesson. I had written in here that in future columns, I plan to tell you more about Squirrel Hill and how it emerged into the 1920s as the community we know today. Now, in researching this, one of the things that occurred to me, really, when you come right down to it, all the stores are different. Forbes, Murray, Foreman, they're the same. It's the same neighborhood, like it was 60, 70 years ago. Really. Now, the people have changed, of course. The faces are the same. What's different? The clothes. Now, when a woman went out shopping on Forbes, to a dress shop, or even shopping to the grocery store, she was all dressed up. She had a skirt on, a sweater, and she might have been at the beauty parlor the day before, pearls, earrings, shoes that had heels. And the men, now I'm not taking away from the men that are here or myself, we just don't dress the way that way. But one of the pictures that was in the book is a picture of, it's not this picture, but there's a picture in there of Murray Avenue, right near the corner of Forbes. And it just happened to show two young fellows walking down the street. And they're all dressed up. The belts were around their waist, not down here somewhere. They had shoes on, they wore flip-flops, tennis shoes. But the people were the same. The clothes were different, but the people were the same. And Squirrel Hill's the same. It really hasn't changed very much. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. If not,
I got a question.
sure.
The block between Hobart and Phillips, actually right across from Douglas, the one picture shows gas pumps up in front of the building. Wasn't that a car dealer right there?
Well, I don't know if it was a dealer, it was a garage. You mean where Chucky Schwartz is above there?
Uh-huh.
It was a garage,
It was a garage, it wasn't.
but I don't think, well, it might have been.
Corvettes? Does that ring a bell?
Well, the name does, I don't know if they were there, I think they were where the, well, maybe, I was gonna say where the Marfield apartments are, but it's possible.
No, there was another dealer down there, but.
Yeah. Do you have that reprint of Murray Avenue? Who brought that in? Oh, back there.
Yeah.
Where Douglas intersects Murray.
When did Ross's building?
Is that on here?
It was
Well, it's right here.
Phillips.
It's right up the.
Before you could,
Yeah.
the picture,
Yeah,
or
here it
question.
is. At the house. Oh, yeah, look, show you, there's the pumps.
Yeah, that's what made me think.
Oh,
about it.
okay.
I saw that.
Yeah, it probably was, I don't think it was a gas station, it was probably an automobile dealer.
We used to have gas pumps along the sidewalk in a lot of cases with garages back in the early days.
Yeah.
Right, curb service. Yeah.
And on Hobart, near Murray, west side, was there a telephone central building already put in place down there, multi-story, brick building that's there today?
The only one I know of.
That's forward.
Forward.
Do you remember if it was there in 1937?
And Hobart?
No, on Lower Murray.
Forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On
it
the
was
west
a-
side of Murray,
That
near
was-
forward.
It was built probably in the 30s. I imagine.
Because that housed the technology of the day in terms of communication. Was that known to you?
Is that what?
Did you know about that building and what it was?
Probably not.
Okay, because it really would have been on the far edge, like computers are today.
I used a cell phone then. I didn't know.
Well, they got the cell phone, they had to have that.
That time, there was Ben Schulman, Paul Zetti, Trio Life wasn't in Squirrel, they were in Oakland. Rotary Shoulder was in, yeah, Fofenskheim, which is where the, Fofenskheim, where the Giant Eagle parking lot is behind Beacon. It's a house, an old house, converted into a synagogue. There were some on Bartlett, but I don't, in houses, but I don't know if they were there then or not. But eventually, they all got the Squirrel. Tree of Life did,
Hurricane 52.
Temple Sinai, yeah, Sheratora. In the 30s, there weren't as many.
That Sholem was founded about 40.
Oh, yeah, that corner.
On the second floor.
Yeah, it's that corner, right. The office was, I don't know if they had services there, but their offices were there.
Where was it?
Best show.
Second floor of the Orpheum Theater.
So when was that show built?
It's probably in the 30s
The
sometime.
cornerstone is 30.
By
Tallest
the
spot in
book.
Pittsburgh.
That was a map. Now, I know you have one. But all our speakers come up. You now have a brand new one.
They can sell it.
Right.
My pictures of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One further meeting announcement. Michael has been having a chat with, several chats with Franklin Toker, who was here tonight. Right?
Right.
I left about midway through. It was in a vest sweater. Toker is the one that set the record for drawing folk into this room with his talk about the book he wrote on the Kaufmans, Falling Water, and the Architect. Right. He drew 110 folk into this film. He has a new book out. And in fact, that book was put in the bag that they gave the dignitaries of the G20. And the latest, first of all, Franklin Toker is a professor of the history of science and philosophy at the University of Pittsburgh. And the new book is about Pittsburgh architecture. So he's beginning.
History of art, he's in the history of art, not, he's a different department from philosophy.
Oh, yeah, no, okay.
The art.
All right, and we're going to clarify in a moment, right? So that book is out. And Michael will try to get it to talk to us. And on his last book, of course, he was so much in demand elsewhere that it took him a while to get to us, but eventually did. And I see that the fact he was here shows some interest. So we may see him before the year's out. Rex, you want to clarify his position?
Oh, what? He's at Pitt in the art history department, and his
Art history.
specialty is architecture.
Okay, it's not the history of science and, okay, all right. Thank you. Any more? Thank you.
We did good. No, I. Yeah.
Yeah, that's more like it.
They got the film lined up for November, I don't know.
We do have plates filled with these. So if you wanted to get a copy, they yeah, right.
I'll be there in a moment.
I don't think I did it yet. I have it downloaded, but I didn't have a disc made of it. But I can bring one for next time.